So this talk's a little bit outside of what I'm used to. I'm used to talks with a lot of equations and charts and numbers, so this is kind of a little different. I will spare you any equations here. So I'm just going to talk about what it means to be an unbiased observer in science, but yet have a really strong belief system as far as faith goes. So this has been kind of my life for the last 9 years. I've been in research science and worked on just various projects, and a lot of them are kind of like almost hot topics at times. So my main subject matter is actually applied statistics, which put me on many team projects at this point. So most of them in the areas of forefront research and science, from like astrophysics, an expanding universe, to water resource management in the area of climate change, to genomic expression of breast cancer and treatment options, and addiction intervention for drug studies. So it turns out that there's a lot of science fields where nobody wants to do their own math. So they tend to ask me to come on the team with them. So, but these are all very like hot topics and things that people tend to have a lot of opinion on. And going in as a statistician or something, you're not supposed to have an opinion. You can't have an opinion on, Big Bang or expanding universe or climate change or anything as you walk into a project. It's just really not part of what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be looking, kind of stepping back, observing, doing analysis. So I just took this quote from Mark Twain, took out one of the swear words. But there are liars, dirty, rotten liars, and statisticians. And this is kind of said about the profession because anybody can take numbers and twist them to do whatever they want. And so it's kind of the fear in the world that, you have this power with the data, that you can like omit data or twist it to anything that you want to do. So, yeah, so it's just this agenda, trying to stay out of the agenda of it all. So and I've heard it said in the science community that Christians are incapable of unbiased scientific observation. Like, I've actually heard people say they wouldn't want a Christian on their team. Well, usually they just don't know. But, it's... I do think, though, it's true. It is almost impossible for anyone to be really an unbiased observer, like in science. And so I don't think this just goes for Christians. I think it's true pretty much for any person. They come in with some set of preconceived ideas. So it is part of the role to step back and kind of leave those aside to kind of do the job. But my Christian heart lives in this world of faith, where by faith we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. And so I live in this tension of the visible world and this invisible world. And, every time, occasionally they do kind of clash a little bit. You've got these things going on. So in this verse especially comes alive in my world when I was working on the dark energy project in astrophysics. I mean, we're working very much on the universe and all those kinds of things. And you come to see a verse like this and you're like, wait, all this was made by God. Like, there's something going on behind this, but we're not going to talk about that. Like, so God creates everything, and I spend most of my days fitting equations to it, taking samples and observing the visible universe. But observed science is merely that, observing the visible and somewhat invisible world. Well, yeah, if we're talking about dark energy, it's pretty invisible, but that's, yeah. So these theories in equations do not typically contradict or even try to describe the unseen God or how he brought all of this visible world into being, thankfully. So it's not like it always is clashing, but there is this idea that science and faith really, they have this tension to them. So I just was kind of breaking this down the other day and thinking back through some of these things that I've felt over the last few years. And I really kind of break up in my head, and I know maybe this isn't completely correct, I can look it up in the dictionary, but between truth and fact. And I just see the world in categories of truth and fact, and then way down here I said, and some theory, because a lot of what we talk about actually in science is theory. It's not quite fact yet. It's like posited ideas. And this comes up a lot in cosmology. Every year they come out with this big catalog of this year's theories, and next year they spend the whole year rebutting why last year's theories didn't work out, and then they write another set of theories, and so it goes on. And so in that world, I got very used to holding these things as theories that came out every year, because a lot of times things get overturned. I mean, what we believed in science 10 years ago maybe isn't what we even think of it now. I mean, Einstein walks in and revolutionizes the whole field, right? So, but truth I see as something as like believing, I believe by faith, like the unseen God, and he made everything. And that doesn't contradict, usually, the observed science of there's a moon out there, and let's take some supernova measurements and put some observed equations and framework to it and describe what we're seeing. So a lot of the time they don't conflict. Where it gets a bit tricky, though, is usually where theories come in. And a lot of the times I'm trying to avoid getting in arguments with people. And I think that's kind of the main point, right? Like, you lose influence once you've kind of offended someone. And so trying not to get in long debates over posited theories and how that comes in. There's also usually just a ton of assumptions underlying theories. In astrophysics, for example, the majority of equations have underlying theories, like the speed of light's been constant forever, and Hubble's constant has been constant forever. And so even as more data is collected on that, those are all theories. And so theories just kind of line up on top of each other. And it's pretty neat. But like, if one falls apart, they go rethink them all. So just knowing that, like knowing that we're in this like process of still like exploring things. And every now and then somebody will come out and be like, no, this is fact. And you're like, oh, yeah, let's give it some more time. I'm kind of the statistician, right? Like, we're 95% confident, but, there's always that chance. So I think for me, too, that's kind of where I live. I'm just like, we'll see. I'm a little bit more pessimistic, maybe, in that way. So usually, like, I would say, most people don't really discuss truth a lot in the science world. That's just really the faith-based thing. You might discuss that over lunch. Somebody will say, I'm an atheist, or something like that, or there was a ghost in my house last night, or whatever, faith-based type thing they might be talking about. Facts, people don't tend to argue over those either. Those are just concrete, observed things. But where people start having, like, the discussion is in these theories. And a lot of time that's where the opinions are and the emotions are, and those are the things that I immediately try to stay out of. So I've been in rooms with all liberal statisticians. And even inside that room, they don't all agree on particular things. Like, in one time, I remember they were talking about climate change and its implications. And it was one of the messiest discussions. You would have thought that there were, like, Christians and non-Christians in the room, but no, they were all just kind of the atheist viewpoint, and they didn't agree on their viewpoint. And I'm sure if you asked inside the church, people wouldn't all agree on things. So it just, there's a lot of things that come up, especially in my work, that there's a lot of opinions and emotion behind. So this is just a complex set of topics, but this just keeps in my mind but avoid foolish controversies, genealogies, arguments, and quarrels about the law, because these things are pointless and worthless. And so I just kind of have this idea. So when I speak, I tend to give 45-minute presentations, and they're pretty much all fact. We saw 100 supernovas, we fit an equation to them, oh, isn't it pretty? This is kind of some of the ideas we could draw from it, and here's my probability that's really, that theory is truth. So it's easy on my side in some of these cases to just kind of stand back. It's kind of the same thing with climate when I work on those. I report numbers, I report things like there's 2 degrees of warming in these 5 cities, and there's -1 degree of warming in these other 3 cities, and then we continue from there, and I go, and we might be able to draw some of these conclusions from it. So in general, though, I found that there is some wisdom and for me, this wisdom is personal, because I don't want to lose my place of influence by getting into discussions or topics that really, it would be pointless kind of at that point. So I just have these ideas of holding on to my faith with everything I have. I read my Bible, I meditate on it, I reflect on truth, I listen to sermons all the time, and there's like, Jesus is the way, and maybe even as Lisa was saying, but you have to be careful how you speak about the truth to people. You still need to have wisdom when to share things and when not to share things. And I think really that's kind of what I was reflecting on when giving this talk. It's not so much that I can't have beliefs, it's just how I personally project those and how I share them with people. And then the easy stuff for me, data's fun, facts are interesting, I love facts, it's like walking Wikipedia, right? Like, you can just do that. I don't know, if I'd been a kid and they had Wikipedia, I would have, like, spent my life on it. Like, so, but don't use facts to manipulate people. Don't be one of those dirty, rotten liars, or, And I think sometimes we don't see, even when we're doing it, we have a cause or an emotional thing, and we go out and try to collect fact that supports that, and I see it all the time. It drives me nuts, because, I'm that kind of data person. I'm like, wait, that's totally, like, you're leaving this out, and you're leaving that out, and I'm like, okay, I can't do this, like. So I have to stay out of those disputes, So, and then I try to stay out of debates over theory. It's just not worth it. It's not truth. It's just not usually worth it for me. It would lose me, like I said, a place of influence, and that's something that I've been guarding. I want to be able to go into any closed country. I want to be able to work with scientists and people that maybe don't have the same belief system as me, but we can still be friends, and we can still have relationship and get along. And I think the main point is just I have to be able to, on a daily basis, moment by moment, before I speak, discern the difference. What am I speaking on right now? Is this truth? Are these just fun facts? Or is this a theory? Are people going to get really, like, riled up or something if I speak? So I just know for me, like, this has been a process of just, like, being very intentional with my words and what I share and where and how, and working with people, and just using, like, godly wisdom in interactions day by day. And so I just thought that was something I'd share, because it's kind of, it seems to really fit with Lisa's talk. So, so any questions? Yeah.
When somebody in regular life, not a scientist, says something is fact and it's theory, actually, that's the correct way to rebuke them on that?
I usually don't. I usually keep my mouth shut. No, because I'm serious, because people tend to have an emotional theory, and then they go collect particular data they want to support that, and if they've gone to do that, then they obviously, there's something behind that for them that's probably deeper. Maybe in the truth realm or something that just needs more love on it. But yeah, it's usually not, correcting the fact won't actually help them, I don't think. It usually actually causes some confrontation there. But yeah, it's a good point. I notice it a lot, right? Yeah.
It's kind of a specific question, but being a scientist, have you come to any conclusions about how old the Earth is based on both Bible knowledge and science?
I don't work on that, so that's usually my answer to pretty much anything, is I don't work on that.
What about the rainforest?
I don't think China or India has a rainforest, so I think I'm good there too.
But I put my talk about science fiction and fantasy on that.
Yeah.
We touched that stuff.
Yeah. No, I know that the theories, there are many theories on the age of the Earth, and it's hard to collect. It's actually hard to get good solid fact, I think, on that. Yeah.
So I used to work a little bit with statistics.
Yeah.
And it's always about, it's actually in risk, how to measure risk.
Yeah.
But being Christian is about taking risks.
Yeah.
But being a statistic is about avoiding risk.
Yes.
So how do you, so I feel like I have this inner turmoil, like how to integrate my faith with my job.
Like, you want to go bungee jumping, or like, I'm not quite sure.
Well, I was asking in the other room, this guy feels like God has called him to step out of his job and to be in a full-time ministry, but that's a very emotional kind of, you can't measure that.
No, you can't.
And he did.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm in a place where all my data, all my analysis is not backing up, this decision to step out in faith.
Yes.
So,
Faith and information don't always go hand in hand. I have to say, my personal life is pretty much completely driven by faith and God. Like, I sit down, I pray about something, God says go do this, it makes no sense, I go do it anyway. And I don't approach my real life according to any research topic, because it would destroy it. It would just, if God says move to Fremont, and you go, I don't know why I'm moving to Fremont, there's not a university there that I can teach at, you move to Fremont. So, yeah. It doesn't all make sense to me. Like, no, the whole world doesn't, right? But that's what faith is about. It's like, oh well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just a little curious, because I'm not a scientist. So
Yeah.
I wonder how a scientist interact with each other at work besides number. Do they actually have personal conversations?
That's a good question. At least the groups I work in, highly nerdy, except for the psychology group, which seems highly social. And I think the weirdest dinner I've ever gone to was half computer scientists and half psychologists at one table, and they were over talking and drinking wine and like carrying on. And the computer scientists were all just sitting there staring at each other going, what are they doing? And we just let them carry the conversation the whole night. And then they looked over us and said, why aren't you guys talking? Like, what do you guys do when you come together? They said, board games. And they looked at them and said, what kind of board games are your favorite? And psychologists go, board games? What are you talking about? Like Monopoly? They're like, no. Like board games, like good ones. Yeah. So it's totally different depending on which research team you're on, I think. But I tend to be, I personally love it. I've not been in like disputes or conflicts. I work with almost all men, which I kind of like because it's very not emotional. We all go out to lunch on Friday, everybody order burritos, it's good. And everybody talk about what they're doing research on and what video games they liked. So, yeah. No. Any other questions?
Well, we have 1 more minute for one question.
That's fine.
So I have one question. Like, I have a friend's daughter who went to Stanford. She got a master's in the scientific field, and she feels there's an actual conflict between what she learned. I'm sure there was some theory in there, not just fact. But
Right.
she just believes there's an inherent conflict.
Yes.
Right. And I'm just wondering how for yourself personally or with others where you work with, how you resolve that conflict between, specific statements in the Bible and,
Right.
like things like fossil dating is an example, which is sort of factual, not just a theory, right?
I am so glad I don't work on that.
But you're still, work with scientists, fact-based, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how do you reconcile that? With others, right?
Yeah, I tend to keep my mouth shut a lot up front until they hand me a data set, and then I go to town with whatever the data's saying. Because I've had this issue actually on my climate project. They had some very definite ideas of where they wanted the papers to go up front, and the data really wasn't supporting it in the region that I was working in. And so we actually started talking about microclimate and that kind of thing, because it didn't quite support the going theory of the day in that it did to an extent, but not to the extent that they wanted. So I'm careful. I'm just really careful. Yeah. Thankfully, I know there are other projects. Some of my friends have had to deal with much harder things. Some of them have gotten into things where they were using fetal tissue and things. Like there is stuff that I was being careful because I was actually on some labs and things like that where we're doing research. So those questions have to be asked, and you have to know where your ethics are. And sometimes you have to put yourself on and off a project because of ethics. So, I leave it up to whoever is dealing with it. Yeah, you have to have a lot of grace for everybody around you because it's crazy. So, yeah.
Thank you.